For nearly 40 years at Sullivan Cromwell, Rodgin Cohen has advised seemingly all of Wall Street in its time of need. In the recent crisis, he participated in nearly every large financial sector deal, J.P. Morgan, Bear Stearns, Wells Fargo, Wachovia, among many others. We're very pleased to welcome him on set with us here this morning. Raj, always good to see you. So how do you see M&A right now? I mean, earlier this week, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway made its biggest purchase ever. So is this the sign of things to come for 2010?
I think it is clearly an optimistic note. The way I look at it, if 3 weeks ago you had tried to sit around and think what acquisition, by whom, and with what statement would have done the most to boost confidence in the American economy and American and M&A, it would be hard to go beyond the 3 Bs of Berkshire, Buffett, and Burlington.
So, I mean, is there anything, obviously, as an M&A expert, that surprised you about, is it the size, is it the composition, is it the industry, anything that made you sit up and take notice?
Yes. Unlike, to an extent, his 2 earlier major investments in GE and GS, which are true icons, those were statements about companies. This was a statement, it seemed to me, about the economy.
Yeah, he said it's an all-in bet on the U.S. economy. I mean, do you think from where you sit, from the clients you speak with, I mean, is the U.S. back in business?
I think that may be a bit of an exaggeration. We still have some major storm clouds, high unemployment, huge deficits at the state level, but it's impossible not to conclude that there are encouraging signs.
Raj, on the subject of M&A, I want to ask a question about the industry that you know best, which is banking. Of course, just the other day, we both heard Larry Summers speak. You were up on the dais. I heard you ask him a question about mid-sized banks, effectively, how concerned the federal government is about the prospect of huge failures in that part of the banking industry. At the same time, we've heard so much about the potential for roll-ups among those small and medium-sized banks. Hasn't happened yet. Why is that?
I think we are unfortunately faced with a series of artificial constraints, accounting conventions and tax conventions, which in this economy make roll-ups very difficult. So M&A in financial services, other than failed banks, has been virtually non-existent.
Do you think it'll come back? I mean, is there a recognition that these constraints exist and that perhaps they ought to be dealt with if we want private capital to come back into the financial services industry?
I am hopeful that as long as we go without transactions, eventually people will begin to understand we need to remove these artificial constraints.
Speaking of artificial constraints or constraints in general, we saw some big news out of the UK earlier this week as well. I mean, the EU is essentially forcing RBS to divest of some of its businesses, the insurance one of note, and now the UK government is going to own northwards of 84%. Are there lessons to be learned with nationalizing a bank as this, either cautionary tale or this is the right way to do it, as Joseph Stiglitz has told us?
I think the danger here may be false lessons. Big is bad is a false premise. And if we go down that road, we're going to have 2 very adverse consequences. The first will be we will have inefficient banks, less capable of servicing a global economy. And second, we're going to mask the need for real reform. It's not to break up banks, it's to get at the heart of the regulatory issues.
They also, I remember we spoke with the head of the BBA saying that part of the reason that they made this move was to give the taxpayers in the UK a better chance of getting their money back. Is that a fair strategy call, or do you see more politics behind the scenes than anything else?
I don't know whether it was politics or not, but it is difficult for me to believe that a government-enforced mandate to destroy what the businessmen have built is going to produce higher returns for the government as a shareholder.